1 year out from an election deadline for Fiji, Pacific foreign ministers met in Auckland as a sign of strength and solidarity. But will Fiji's military leader Frank Bainimarama comply with the Pacific Forum's dictate? And what will happen should he refuse?
It's a situation that's not a elected government in office. It's a military government, and you all know that. And I think for us, I'm elected leader for Papua New Guinea. I don't know what goes through the mind of a military leader. It's hard.
It's important because the forum has now recognized that there was a problem at home and that needs fixing. That has never been recognized.
Do you trust him to meet those commitments?
Well, proof of the pudding's going to be in the eating, isn't it?
Do you trust the Commodore to stick to his word?
Well, I think we'll just have to wait and see. I mean, implementation is, we haven't got to that stage.
How optimistic am I? Well, unless we give it our best shot, from the point of view of external influences and countries that are capable of assisting the process, then it will not be successful.
To ensure that we get that ultimate objective, which is democracy in Fiji.
One point I'd like to make is that had the Nkurasta government stayed in power, it would have included members of the leaders of the previous coup, the George Speight, the collaborators and the plotters, and they would have taken key positions in Parliament.
Is it time for Australia and New Zealand to change its stance, to lift travel sanctions, to front-foot a dialogue, and encourage Fiji to engage in free and fair elections?
Our objective is, as we put it, to see an election in Fiji and to restore democracy and human rights to Fiji. On the one hand, there's no point rewarding bad behaviour. The most recent performance I saw from the interim Fiji government was to tip out the editor of one of the newspapers who was holding them to account and trying to render some scrutiny. So I don't see any point in rewarding that type of behaviour. Equally, we do want to make it clear that there is the potential there for a dialogue or a constructive conversation. Equally, Australia and New Zealand both stand ready to render necessary assistance. For example, we stand ready to render whatever assistance is required for the actual conduct of an election. We're still waiting for the interim Fiji government to indicate, for example, when its election supervisor might be appointed, for it to trigger its Boundaries Commission process. So it's not as if the interim government hasn't had the opportunity of doing these things.
I don't know why you people getting all these lies about the roadmap and people keep telling me we want to see a concrete path. We've done all that needs to be done to prepare us for election.
In October 2007, the leaders of the Pacific Islands nations held a summit on the Tongan island of Vava'u. The topic discussed was how to restore democracy to Fiji, and how should the Pacific nations force the Fiji interim government regime to comply with their dictates. Relations between Fiji's military leader Frank Bainimarama and the Australian and New Zealand governments was strained.
I think a very good outcome on Fiji. We are really showing the relevance of the forum in taking the agenda forward. There was unanimity that the election should be held by the end of the first quarter of 2009. The Fijian commander accepted that. He has accepted the roadmap that needs to be consistent with the Fijian constitution, and it needs to be legal, therefore. And the engagement, the mechanisms for engagement that the forum's put in place with Fiji, I think, are very constructive. So I think this is the best imaginable outcome, certainly from Australia's point of view, the best imaginable outcome we could have got on Fiji.
How solid do you think it is when just 2 weeks ago he said that members of the SDL party, the party that won most of the seats in the last election, wouldn't be eligible to stand? I mean, this is dramatic change, isn't it?
What he was confronted with today was that there is no sympathy anywhere around the Pacific Island Forum table for his view that an election really wasn't the top priority, and that was his starting position, that the elections scheduled wouldn't necessarily solve anything. Leaders made it very clear they wanted elections, they wanted them within the constitution and law of Fiji, and they wanted to know that the result would be accepted, and they wanted to know that everybody could participate.
The question concerning Australia and New Zealand governments was one of credibility.
He can make changes to the constitution ahead of the next election. Does that go against what the Forum decided yesterday?
The Forum's pretty clear that the process forward in Fiji has to be credible, and that rules out any shonky changes to the constitution. Fiji has a constitution. The Commodore, by his own admission, says that constitution is still in force. Therefore, it's very important that the pathway forward is in line with the constitution and laws of Fiji.
His suggestion was that a constitutional change can be made by referendum, and that it wouldn't be the full constitution that was changed, just some clauses in particular, one person, one vote. Is that in the spirit or the letter of what was agreed yesterday?
As I said yesterday, everything is going to hinge on whether this is a credible roadmap, and that doesn't mean those who've seized power by the barrel of a gun dictating changes or rigging the way in which changes are made. It's got to be credible, and I suggest the course now is for the Fiji interim government representatives to be sitting down with the Forum Joint Working Group in Fiji to work through these issues. We are all poised to support the next stages of a credible process, but it has to be a credible process.
And the one I outlined to you, which was outlined to us by the Commodore, isn't in your mind a credible process, or could be?
We haven't seen anything around his proposal for a People's Charter as helpful to the roadmap. We think it's a diversion.
So a change to the Constitution through a referendum? No.
He is proposing a process through a People's Charter which claims to promote reconciliation, which he is leading, when he has too much baggage to lead any kind of reconciliation process.
Would you think you couldn't change a constitution by anything other than a parliament?
This is the problem when you close down your parliament and act in a way that's clearly unconstitutional and illegal. Finding a pathway back from that is torturous. That is why the Forum yesterday, when discussing the matter, said that the way forward should be based on the Constitution and the law of Fiji.
What sort of support could New Zealand give towards Fiji's return to democracy?
We've always indicated we would help fund the electoral process, as we have in the past. We funded partially the elections last year. Australians are also poised, the European Union is poised to be helpful. Australia's already funded a large part of the census which has been held to establish what the population is and how it's distributed. So we're all ready, but we need two to tango.
Commodore called New Zealand and Australia's travel sanctions as childish. What do you think of that?
I think they've been extremely effective as sanctions. New Zealand has not put economic sanctions on Fiji, but we have had targeted sanctions, and those have certainly had a great effect on the Fiji military and those who have been complicit with them in the coup.
What about allowing the members?
Back on Tongatapu Island, Frank Bingham